Hello everyone and welcome back to some more Tokyo Babel with me, Phantom Zwei. When we last left off, we began the game, we met our protagonist, Sorami, we met a mysterious young man named Setsuna, and a few other characters that I imagine will come back to play a larger role as we continue. But without further ado, let's go on. Well then. No doubt owing to my mind beginning to be fully liberated from the haunting memories of that nightmare, I sensed a fresh surge of memories washing over me in fierce waves. Is it just me, or is there something off about that sentence? Alright. My name was Kagutsu Sorami. I had both of my parents and a sister called Shina. She attended the same school and would always accompany me on my way home. Yep, so far so good. My memories began to return at the smooth pace of a well-oiled cogwheel. I recalled memories of my youth, times when I was happy, times when I was sad, joy and sorrow, pain and anger. Certain details were still vague, but I figured that to be within the bounds of what could be considered natural. Around the same time I remembered last night's dinner. A plate of rice omelet. I heard a female voice call out to me. Schoolgirl C. Hi there.
妹さんが待っているわ。早く行ってあげなきゃね。一ついいかな。どちら様かしら?
The girl cocked her head to the side, staring back at me with the expression of someone who had just been deeply insulted. Okay. She bore a slight resemblance to a certain white-robed ghost from a horror flick that was all the rage just a few years back. In any event, she gave me the chills. Yeah, it's a little creepy. She was certainly beautiful, yet her unusually long hair spilled forward in unkempt strands, lending her a positively Sadako-ish aura.
私のこと知らない?ちょっと待って。今思い出すから。
She's,
さっちゃん。それは私のあだ名であって、本名じゃないわ。ごめん。
Suddenly, it came to me. Wait, no. It didn't quite feel like remembering something.
漆原青美さんだよね?
Aomi nodded, her features loosening into a lovely smile.
当たり。よかったよかった。放送部の漆原です。はじめまして。あ、やっぱ初対面なんだ。絶賛記憶喪失中の久々空美さん。いや、普通に記憶戻ってますから。寝ぼけてただけっすから。あら、つまらない。授業中に眠りこいて悪い夢見て寝ぼけただけです。それももう過去の話。
I'd take all those haunting memories, chuck them in a room, and swallow the key. Be done with them, so to speak. But just like a stubborn piece of chewing gum refusing to let go of one's shoe, they kept tormenting me, even now. I wondered if torment would truly be the right word to describe it. What if they were a warning?
ねえ、それってどんな? いや、もう覚えてない。何もさっぱり覚えてないの。記憶から消えた。喪失してしまったの。バックアップも取ってない。名前をつけて保存しなさいっていつも言っているでしょうに。言われたことないわね。少なくとも初対面の人間に。
How meta.
ああ、それもそうか。
She gave a comprehending nod. Our conversation was really having a tough time moving forward. It felt kinda odd.
それで何の用なの?ちょっと話してみたくなっただけ。私と?あなたと。
Another lovely smile. The kind that could heal the sick. She really should try and make that her default expression, because the moment she shifted to that frigid glare of hers, it was back to creepy ghost mode all over again. Boy, I was really being rude to her in my mind, and I just met her.
まあいいや。何を話そっか。いいお天気ね。
Well, that's about as harmless as it gets.
そこから いやまあ確かにいいお天気だけど。
I couldn't finish the rest of the sentence, as the blinding orange of dusk invaded the corridor through the windows. All of a sudden, I recalled the nightmare. That's right. Back in the dream, I was sleeping at my desk in the classroom.
電話。ああ、夢をちょっと思い出したのよ。確か電話が鳴ってたわ。へえ、私電話なんて知らないわ。そりゃ知らないでしょうよ。私の夢なんだもの。で、教壇の上に黒電話が置いてあったのよ。
The memories of my dream came trickling back into my mind, in gradual fragments. Still, I had neither the time, willingness, or obligation to go over each and every detail.
そこらへん、もうちょっと詳しく聞かせてくれない？あー、ごめん。妹と待ち合わせしてるのよ。完全に思い出したら、明日にでも教えるわ。
I gave her a brief wave of my hand and turned to be on my way.
じゃあ、またね。
I ran and ran, breaking into a dash, if not a full-on sprint, sure to put my trusty legs to work as I bolted down a whole set of stairs. It's actually made me recall how I spent a decent amount of time rushing up and down flights of stairs in my dream. In any case, the laws of physics weren't completely flipped upside down anymore. Back in the dream, I recalled going up 7 floors, then down 10. That school was like a fortress. Needless to say, the classroom I needed to reach didn't require a Herculean effort of that caliber. In fact, I arrived within a minute. Class 1-3. I carefully slid the door open and inspected the classroom. And there she was, gazing idly out of the window. It appeared she had yet to notice me. Or maybe not. She abruptly turned around, meeting my gaze.
お姉ちゃん、遅いよ。
I met her smile with a few rapid sorries, then gave her hair a sisterly ruffle.
罰として、バルドダッツのジェラートおごって。ちょっと、バルドダッツなんてどんだけハードル上げるのよ。100円アイス以外はおごれないわね。
The Baldats, however you say it, was one of those posh ice cream shops in town, boasting astronomical prices compared to what the average person could expect an ice cream to cost. You would no doubt expect the flavor to make up for that, but in my humble opinion, the price didn't quite match the experience. Or maybe my tongue was simply too indoctrinated to only be able to enjoy average, homely flavors. I was also not a huge fan of that creepy-looking vulture they had as a mascot. Seriously, who thought to make a profit with that thing?
ケチくさいな、お姉ちゃんは。当然のように自覚しておりますわ。
I struck a pose, placing the back of my hand on one cheek, giggling like some spoiled princess. Sheena, in turn, eyeballed me like I was a being from another dimension.
まあいっか、帰ろう。
Good idea. We'd go home, change out our school uniforms, and into comfy sweatshirts, while enjoying Mom's homemade dinner. A crude image flashed before my eyes, though I wondered if calling it a vision may be more appropriate of an expression. Fragments of that grotesque nightmare blossomed into view, staying for no longer than a second. A ravaged, worn-down classroom, in complete disorder, fallen victim to the jaws of decay, its very air reeking of corruption. The stench of shriveled corpses, or that of skeletal remains, stands of decayed flesh still clinging to their bones, or strands, rather. I shook my head, and the world was once again back to normal.
どうしたの？なんか夢見が悪くてね。夢？何かに追いかけられる夢。
It was like watching TV and seeing a momentary flash of static flicker on screen, almost as if someone was jamming my vision. Every time it happened, my eyes would see through the veil of a clean, orderly world, and gaze deep into a hellish abyss in all its wretched glory. Dozens upon dozens of corpses littered the hallways under the scarlet rays of dusk, the tortured, mutilated remains of people massacred by this world's omnipotent tyrant. The sheer volume of the audiovisual stimuli flooding my senses left my mind a complete and utter wreck. I fell to my knees in the middle of the hallway as an oppressive feeling of nausea overcame me, the kind that can make one's stomach entirely too eager to part with its contents. The phone's incessant ringing wouldn't let up, its shrill like the echo of distant thunder. We needed to get out of here, and fast. However, we couldn't stray too far. We still had, right. We had to stay within these walls for a whole hour. Sheena gave me a puzzled look. I took her hand, driven by a sisterly feeling of responsibility to protect her. I took off, forcibly pulling Sheena behind me as the two of us raced through the long hallways, swiftly, yet with no particular destination in mind, focusing on just one thing only: escape. So this is very bizarre, because now it's almost like only her sister's been pulled over, or is it just like they're actually still in the real world? Or the human world, I guess I'd call it, but she's just seeing through to kind of like another dimension or something? I don't know. Soon enough, the world around us began to shift and distort. I turned around, only to witness the hallway behind us being painted anew in midnight colors, its walls viciously eroded by darkness, the hue of tar. Oh shit, she's seeing it now. The sun abruptly vanished, allowing the frigid night to take over its domain. I inhaled a lungful of stagnant air, detecting, ever so faintly, the acrid stench of decay. Realization dawned upon me. What I experienced before waking up was no mere nightmare, but a palpable, tangible reality. Or could this be the dream? An eerie darkness shrouded the hallway in gloom, thick enough that I was having difficulty making out Sheena's face. The moment I placed a foot on the floor, I felt my balance slipping. The linoleum flooring beneath my feet had rotted away, catching one of my legs in a chasm of impenetrable blackness. Sheena wasted no time in rushing to my aid, attempting to pull me up by the arm as I steadied myself with the leg that I still had free. As she did, I felt a jolt of pain in my ankle, the one lodged in the floor. They're actually handling this remarkably well. I think if the world, shifted into some nightmarish hellscape before my eyes, I think I would just break down in a frenzy, you know? Suddenly, my body slipped free, and I collapsed on the floor behind me. Whatever had been locking my ankle in place finally let up. I ended up tackling Sheena with my back, pinning her to the ground. As I placed both hands on the ground and was about to push myself up, I felt an odd sensation at my ankle, the same one that had just been rescued. Uh-oh. What I saw there completely petrified me. A decayed human hand was latching onto my ankle. Sheena staggered backwards with an expression of pure disgust. I attempted to shake off the hand, but all of my efforts proved fruitless. It refused to let go.
この
I put my free leg to use without hesitation, launching a fierce kick to rid myself of the stubborn limb. Sheena assumed a safe distance between the two of us. Oh, come on. Did she think I was doing this because I wanted to?
ねえお姉ちゃんこれ何なのさあ私にはフランした人間の手首に見えるわ偽物だといいよね
Unfortunately, my instincts were telling me that it was very much real.
どうしてそんなのが学校に
Sheena's tone was audibly and unsurprisingly laden with fear. Well, no wonder. I myself was just as terrified, just as chilled to the core as her. And then I noticed something I genuinely wished to ignore. Numerous green blemishes pockmarked the hand's decaying skin. I simply sat and gazed at it in silence, while struggling not to vomit. I was at a complete loss, unable to process the situation. In the end, my whole body trembling at the sheer thought of what I was about to do, I slowly lowered my hands into the hole in the floor.
お姉ちゃん
My fingers caught something. I poured strength into my arms, lifting up the soft, decayed thing. It was certainly not light. In fact, it felt quite heavy, though the fact it was only a torso worked in my favor. In any event, I dragged it out of the hole. Sheena was paralyzed by the sight. That is, a corpse with its hand torn clean off. The body had undergone partial skeletization, with patches of decayed flesh still loosely clinging onto it here and there. I assumed it to be the body of a girl. I was no doctor, yet two primary things still caught my attention. The first concerned the skull, particularly the way that it had been sliced in half diagonally. The corpse's normally round head was therefore missing a considerable chunk due to the nightmarish work of a sharp-bladed weapon of some kind. Whether or not this constituted the cause of death remained unclear. The second thing felt far more noteworthy to me personally, as it had just proven something of critical importance. The corpse was clothed in the very same kind of school uniform I wore. There was something particularly gut-wrenching about seeing a decaying corpse wearing a school uniform. It wasn't just the kind of dead body one would commonly encounter in movies or manga. This body was here, in the flesh, right before my very eyes, wearing a school uniform, the same kind as mine. In short, she was most likely around my age. Her young life had been ended by someone lacking even a shred of compassion. In fact, the deed happened not far from the two of us. The grisly sight of a schoolgirl's lifeless body left me terrified beyond comprehension. I felt my chest being gnawed at from the inside by sheer dread. Almost like I was staring my very own future in the eye. Only the low thrum of my own heartbeat pierced the silence. Our sole relief, the ringing of that phone, was nowhere to be heard.
お姉ちゃんこの人お姉ちゃんのクラスメートじゃないのえだってほら
Sheena scooped up an ID card from the ground nearby and held it up so I could have a better look. The name written on it made the final strand of reason I was still clinging onto, in my mind, evaporate in an instant. Nagumo Yuri. I had two reasons to feel that way. First off, the Nagumo Yuri I knew wouldn't die like this. And second, even assuming she was dead, that she was murdered, there was no way her body would be in such an advanced state of decay. After all, it hadn't been that long since we last talked and said goodbye to each other. I refused to believe this hollow, withered husk of a human being would be my friend.
お姉ちゃん
Sheena's voice restored a semblance of order to my panic-stricken thoughts.
行こう逃げましょう 何なのわけがわからないよ。いいから早く泣くのは後になさい。
This is more akin to the reaction I would have expected from the beginning. Just totally freak out. Sheena gave me a silent nod. Good girl. If she had broken down crying, I wasn't confident that I could have held back the tears either. I was afraid, terrified to my very core. There was something in the air, a dense, near-suffocating presence of ill will. It was neither mere bloodlust nor pure hatred. Instead, I felt the vicious playfulness of a predator, wondering how best to torment and toy around with its prey. I could feel that very predator's eyes on my skin, and so I ran, through long hallways, down the stairs, then back up and down again. There was no sign of any life around us, and the once crowded campus now utterly devoid of its former bustle of students coming and going. This had to be a continuation of that nightmare. Were my dreams invading reality itself? Or was it the other way around? Had I merely been having a long, long dream, one that I'm now waking up from? I couldn't tell. The memories I once thought clear and definite began to blur, drifting further and further into obscurity. I considered the worst, that I had gone completely mad. What if I was actually locked up in a hospital room somewhere? What if this was all just the figment of my own imagination? The vivid hallucination, or a vivid hallucination, nothing more. The very thought robbed my knees of all strength. I led Sheena onward, driven by an unquenchable sense of duty and responsibility. The warmth of her hand in mine, moist from the traces of sweat, the common memories we shared, those were the only things still clear in my mind. I felt her pulling on my arm. It wasn't a bad idea. A classroom certainly was more appealing than an endless trek through the hallways. I flung the classroom door open and darted inside. That may have proven to be a fatal mistake. Ooh. Yeah, that's not good. Both Sheena and I were left speechless by what we found inside. Numerous corpses, their heads sliced clean off, were neatly lined up next to each other. There were roughly an even number of male and female students among the bodies, each wearing a school uniform. Tears began to trickle down my cheeks. Professor Kumamoto was up on the podium. Only his torso, though. His features contorted into an expression of hellish pain, hiding very little of the sheer anguish he must have had in his final moments. 2 decapitated heads hung from the ceiling, Ada and his girlfriend. The former wore a mask of silent terror, while the latter's features reflected grim acceptance. A sight befitting only the cruelest of nightmares. Yet here it was before my very eyes, all in its hellish reality. Sheena huddled closer to me. I immediately regretted not telling her earlier to avert her gaze. Sheena coiled her arms around mine. I gave each of the bodies a long, careful look, while making absolutely sure not to breathe through my nose. I timidly drew closer to the podium to inspect Professor Kumamoto's body. The blood had dried. I reached out to touch the head dangling from the ceiling. It was the same, just as I had expected. In an act of trying to block out the sheer abnormality of the situation, the cogwheels of my brain began to turn. Something felt off. There was something odd about all the decaying corpses we'd come across, including these ones. In fact, the whole situation reeked of foul play. How come all the blood had already dried? How could that even be possible? It hadn't been 10 minutes since I'd last talked to Professor Kumamoto. The corpse's skin felt more than just slightly chilly to the touch. It was positively frigid. Now, I was no doctor, but could a dead body really turn this cold in such a brief span of time?
分かってもしょうがないことだけど。聞かせてよ。あ、うん。さっき私熊本先生に会ったのよ。あとあだとその彼女にも。死体が冷たすぎないかなって、そう思っただけ。どうでもいいことでしょ。どうでもいいよね。だってあるんだもの。ここにこうして本物の死体があるんだもの。
Sheena nodded in agreement. She was looking at me round-eyed, fear clearly visible in her gaze.
教室から出よう、シーナ。もうこんな場所にいたくない。
Sheena turned to slide the classroom door open, or at least she meant to. Her brief whisper of a phrase planted a seed of anxiety in my heart. Sheena attempted to force the door open, but it simply would not budge. I gently pushed Sheena aside to try my luck as well, but I didn't fare any better. The door, almost as if someone was holding it closed from the other side, remained tightly shut. I tried another door out of sheer desperation, the one at the far side of the room, but none would budge. As a last resort, I tried to turn the window as well. Or rather, I turned to try the window as well, but that proved to be a wasted effort just the same. Sheena broke down sobbing, her heart no doubt having buckled under the pressure. I myself was moments away from joining her. In the end, though, my desire to protect her eclipsed the urge to cry. I needed to look after her for just a little while longer. Sheena stared at me with her mouth agape. It's an odd reaction, but yeah. Are you really asking this, surrounded by dead bodies? Okay, wait just a second. Was this really the time and place for such a discussion? Thank you, game. I appreciate you acknowledging that. Okay, wait up. Hold on for just a second. Sheena launched into one question after another. I needed to calm her down. Something in her just flipped all of a sudden. This was her way of coping with the situation. Either that, or this is all like a hallucination she's been driven into by that monster that caught her, and that monster may actually be pretending to be Sheena. Like Sheena might not even exist, who knows? And this is actually the creature that was after her to begin with, and they're just trying to find out more about her ally / their enemy. Just a guess. At this rate, her mind was going to reach a point of no return. I gave her cheek a loud slap, but she simply went on with an unflinching smile. I could feel the air around us chill.
でもダメだよね。だってお姉ちゃんがいるし。お姉ちゃんがいるから私は恋もできなかった。
What?
ちょっとこんな時に何言ってるの？
Sheena glared at me with a pair of crimson eyes burning with hatred as her lips curled into a mocking smile.
だって言ったじゃない。私より先に彼氏作ったら承知しないわよって。
I did say that. Numerous times, in fact. But it was a joke, nothing more. I thought she understood.
あれは冗談よ。何言ってんのよ。そんなの分かってたでしょ。分からない。冗談って何？お姉ちゃんにとっては冗談でも私にとっては冗談じゃなかった。そうよ。全部お姉ちゃんのせい。こんな目に遭ってるのも全部。シーナ、やめて。やめない。お姉ちゃんなんでしょ。これ全部お姉ちゃんのせいなんでしょ。だから。
Her sentence ominously broke off in the middle. I took a careful look at her features to find an answer. All that met my gaze was a blank stare. Her lips were moving ever so slightly, but I couldn't quite make out anything. I couldn't notice it at first. No, that wasn't quite right. I did notice, but chose to ignore it. No. My heart cried out in protest as a flash of silver lunged at Sheena's throat and buried itself deep in the flesh. It took me mere seconds to realize that it was a neatly ornamented switchblade. That's right. It was a knife. My knife. So why was it buried in the hilt of my beloved sister's throat? Oh, come on. Even pranks had their limits. Well, this is awkward. She groaned at me in a hoarse tone, making it seem almost as if I had done something bad. I glanced down at my palms and saw them stained with blood. I staggered backwards. Sheena followed. Her voice was the chirp of a rusted flute, her gaze livid with condemnation. My hands were smeared with thick warm blood. Whose, though? My mind cracked like a delicate piece of porcelain. The memories came back to me in vivid detail. How fed up I'd been with Sheena's hysterical questioning. I casually pulled out the switchblade from my pocket. Ah, right. I stabbed her. I did think her irritating at the time, but who wouldn't in a situation like that? I may have wished for her to disappear, even if it only lasted for a mere second. It was the kind of fierce, murderous impulse we all have from time to time, but one that barely anyone genuinely follows up on. There was no way I would kill her. She was my sister, my very own blood. Why would I plunge this knife into her throat? Ridiculous! It was all an illusion, a hallucination. The warmth of her blood, the way it trickled down my palm, everything. It had to be. Sheena collapsed on the ground, her attempts at breathing coming out as a low series of wheezes. Sheena's glare pierced me to my core, her eyes reflecting nothing but pure hatred, animosity, and contempt. I'd had enough. I couldn't take it anymore. I was going to break.
お前が殺した。
My thoughts, my thoughts were interrupted by the familiar voice of a certain teacher. Professor Kumamoto was staring right into my eyes.
お前だよ、お前が殺したんだ。俺は見ていたぞ。はっきりと見ていたぞ。お前だ。お前が殺した。お前が殺した。
I was being chastised by a torso. Yep, I'd say it was almost time. Time for my sanity to hand in its resignation and be on its merry old way, that is.
隠すな、くぐつ空に。殺したのは紛れもなくお前だよ。
The decapitated heads all guffawed in unison.
そうね。あなたが殺しました。他の誰でもない。紛れもなくあなたが殺しました。
I killed her? I murdered her? I ended my own sister's life? All their dead eyes fell upon me in an instant, condemning me as a murderer. I repeatedly shook my head in protest, like some spoiled kid. You killed her. Kugutsu Soromi murdered Kugutsu Shina. That was the evident, undeniable truth of the matter. This was insane, utterly and thoroughly. The warning sirens wailed in my head, like the relentless buzz of an insect swarm. Something was off. This entire situation reeked of lies and fabrication. My screams silenced their condemning hisses, leaving Shina's lifeless body on the ground. I somehow managed to stand up on my own 2 feet. I once again reached out towards the classroom's sliding door, all the while trembling like a newborn fawn. It slid open without resistance. I stepped outside, a sigh of relief leaving my lips. I dashed through the pitch-black hallways. I felt a part of the darkness, almost like it could swallow me up whole, any second now. A soft giggle echoed through the hallways, malice seeping into its every syllable. I bit back a scream, never once slowing my advance. A few beads of sweat accumulated in the corners of my eyes, no doubt due to fear. Memories flooded my mind. Right. Shina's always been a touch spoiled. We were nigh inseparable, spending all our school years together. Naturally, we did butt heads from time to time, as sisters usually do, finding this or that irritating or even enviable in the other. Despite all that, she was a good sister, earning the adoration of all those around her, myself included. I didn't stab her. I had no reason to. I mean, why would I? Bewildered, I rushed into the toilet, flinging open the door of the furthest stall at the back, same as last time, and was left near speechless by what awaited me. I was back in the classroom. The bathroom stall door I opened had turned into the same old squeaky sliding door that led into the classroom. Okay. And in there stood my own sister, completely unscathed, almost like that incident with the knife had all just been a dream. For a brief second, I even forgot to breathe. My brain had already entered a state of overload from my myriad of unanswered questions. It was attempting to process. I felt my mind on the brink of collapse. Sheena's smile withered in an instant as she grabbed me by the throat, lifting me up. My feet kicked and struggled as I hung in midair, but Sheena met my resistance with an ever-tightening grip, her strength out of this world.
黙ってお姉ちゃん。お姉ちゃんは私の質問に答えるだけで。それ以外の一切は沈黙含めて反抗とみなす。次に何か無駄なことをしゃべる。
She placed her nails on my cheeks, then gently retracted them. I felt a sharp pain as her nails cut the skin open.
お姉ちゃんの顔は肉と神経を残したまま引き剥がされることになるからね。わかった。
As I gave Sheena an eager nod, her grip relaxed, setting me free.
助けが来るというのは本当なの？多分。
The moment I uttered the word, a tremendous blow crashed into my stomach and sent me flying a few meters back, straight into a wall. I felt like my internal organs had just been crushed by the sheer impact of it.
多分じゃないでしょ。イエスかノーか来るのか来ないのか。こんな簡単な条件付けすらも理解できないの？どうなの？
The pain was unbearable. My mind yielded to raw violence. Struggling with tears, I spat out something that could very well have been the truth. The girl wearing Sheena's skin exhaled a low giggle. Her eyes burned crimson, her gaze awash with the zeal of a madwoman.
へえ、来るってどうやって？ここは私の世界、私の支配下にあるのに？私の世界。そうね、まだ気づいてなかったのよね。生きてるってなんて不幸なのかしら。私がお姉ちゃんだったら死んだ方がマシって思うわ。
I wondered where she was going with this as I struggled to endure waves upon waves of unrelenting pain.
ね、元お姉ちゃん。昨日の記憶はある？昨日の記憶。
Yesterday.
普通に学校に行って授業を受けて放課後に近所の本屋に寄って買い物したんだよね。そうだけどその時本棚のファッション雑誌を見つけてパラパラとめくり、あまり良さそうな服がなかったから棚に戻したんだよね。知ってるよ、当然知ってる。だってそれ私が設定したんだもの。どういうこと？あなたの名前は本当にくぐつ空に？そうよ。証明できる？証明なんてできないけど、する必要ない。だって私は私だよ。くぐつという名字も本当にあなたなのね。単に傀儡の漢字を変えただけなのに。
She flashed a mischievous smile. Then came another blow, without hesitation or warning. The beating of my own heart filled my ears. My vision blurred, my mind devolved into a jumbled mess. Memories I once held dear melted into obscurity, one after the other.
そう、あなたにはね、記憶なんてないの。思い出も性格も全部嘘。本物なのはあなたの顔だけ。やめて。
Gotta say, this game does a pretty good job with the atmosphere. It's creepy. Would have been appropriate if I played this before Halloween, I guess.
お姉ちゃんが守ってあげなくちゃ。大事な妹を守らなきゃ。そのためだったら命をかけてもいい。バカみたい。
I desperately wished to cover my ears, but I realized I had to hear her out. Otherwise, I knew she would kill me unless I listened to her every word. and so I steeled myself, ready to endure everything as she ridiculed all I held dear, mocking me in my misery. It was hell itself.
それなら私は一体何なのよ。さあ、私は名前を忘れたけど、誰かからお姉ちゃんをもらっただけだから。あなたがもともとどんな存在だったかなんて知ったこっちゃないな。
It was simply too much. I felt myself helplessly crushed under the weight of her words.
なんでこんなことねえ、これってそんなにひどいこと？だって人間ってただの消耗品でしょ。勝手に誕生して勝手に生きて勝手に死ぬ。それを私がちょっといたずらに使ってどこが悪いの？そう、いたずら。踏みつぶしてもひねりつぶしても叩きつぶしても自然発生するじゃない。私はたまたま譲り受けたお姉ちゃんを記憶をいじり回して遊び道具に使っただけ。
Pure anger burned in me, yet all I felt was my entire body growing colder and colder. She was no human. In fact, she looked down upon them as cattle. In her eyes, I was no more than an insect, ready to be massacred on a whim whenever it would please her. Okay, I thought that she looked like the girl that we saw that had tracked us down in the bathroom, but I was like, okay, maybe it's just, like a design thing, like it isn't actually her. But okay, it was her who found us. That makes sense. So she's the mastermind of this whole situation. Though I imagine that in the grand scheme of things, she's probably a small fry, or at least not like the main villain. Who can say? It's far too early to know. She responded with a vile howl of laughter.
何に見える？あなたの可愛い妹？ユーリ？それとも熊本先生？あだ？それ以外の名前も知らない誰か？違うでしょ？違うわよね。
Realizing she was expecting a reply from me, I gave her one, albeit timidly.
人間じゃない。それだけはわかる。じゃあ、私は天使？それとも悪魔？
She narrowed her eyes. If I made a mistake here, I knew she would pulverize me in an instant.
あなたは
Which one would be correct? What did she want me to say? It was entirely possible that both answers were wrong. Ah, damn it. I was confused beyond words.
どっちよ？
The abrupt shift in her tone startled me. Despite having mocked me with such ferocity until a minute ago, she now appeared awfully restless, her scornful gaze practically glued to me.
ねえ、私は一体何なの？天使？悪魔？こんなひどいことするから悪魔？でも天使だってひどいよ。あいつら人間のことなんとも思ってないんだもの。知ってる？気づいてる？世界なんてとうの昔に終わってるの。この世界は腐って見放されてどうしようもなくなってるの。だから私だってやりたいことをやる。望んだことを望む。好き勝手にもてあそんで好き勝手に殺してやるんだ。全部遊んでやる。腕を掴んで引きちぎり、首を掴んでひねり回す。そして永遠にこの学校で遊び続ける。それが私の考えた支配、私の望みなの。天に向けて声高らかに重曹を吐き、地に向けて厳かに暴虐を与えてやる。
She howled back at me, her mind truly and utterly broken beyond repair. She leveled her gaze at my dumbfounded expression, her eyes brimming with insatiable bloodlust.
ねえお姉ちゃん、楽しいでしょ？楽しいよね。楽しいと言って。ここは私の王国、私の理想郷。だからみんな楽しいの。
She glanced around, calling out to all the corpses around her.
楽しいでしょ？みんなもそう思うでしょ？ええ、楽しいわ。
The decayed corpse that was once my friend answered her.
ああ、楽しいさ。
So did the chopped-up homeroom teacher.
すごく幸せさ。
すごく幸せです。
The heads of the two lovers dangling from the ceiling joined in their chorus.
楽しいね。
楽しいよ。
Their decapitated bodies boomed in unison.
楽しいわ。
楽しいさ。
A corpse gave a headless nod,
楽しい。
楽しいぞ。
and yet another voiced his approval.
ほら、みんな楽しいって、みんな幸せだって。そうよ、私は間違ってない。何も間違ってなんかない。だからお姉ちゃんも。
Once again, I felt the piercing gaze of her crimson eyes upon me, and in that moment, I knew I was finished. I would be killed, brutally and without a shred of mercy, in ways far too gruesome for me to even imagine.
いじめてあげる。たっぷりいじめてあげる。生きていることを後悔するほどいじめてあげる。五感と通覚神経は大事に保管して、他を徹底的にいたぶってあげる。バラバラになった自分を見せてあげる。腐敗する過程を思う存分体感させてあげる。生きるってことがどれほど辛くて苦しくて絶望なのか、とことんまで思い知らせてあげるからね。
I felt my thoughts wander far as my mind and soul yielded to complete terror. And then, it happened. 何この音。 Needless to say, it was a phone, sitting right in the middle between the two of us.
嘘。なんでこんなものが。いつ。認めない。
The phone kept ringing, unrelenting in its purpose, almost like it beckoned me to pick it up.
うるさい。
Irritated, Sheena pulverized the phone with one clean swing of her hand. A satisfied smile overtook her features when she confirmed that the ringing had stopped for good.
バグかしら。もう自分ではコントロールできているつもりだったのに、まだ安定していない。
The phone materialized once again, this time at a slightly different spot, about a meter from its previous incarnation.
この
The moment she got rid of the new phone, another one sprang up at a different location. She made sure to destroy that one as well. Yet, mere seconds later, 8 more appeared, 4 on various desks, 1 on the teacher's podium, 1 in front of me, and another at arm's reach, and finally 1 behind Sheena. All 8 phones buzzed alive in a relentless cacophony of sound. Their boom was the trumpet of salvation, mercilessly shattering her lies and deceit to smithereens.
うるさい。
She was no longer swinging her arm to annihilate the phones. Instead, she merely pointed a finger at them, destroying each one in rapid succession. Yet still the ringing refused to cease, forcing Sheena to cover her ears with both palms, almost like she was ready to pluck her own head from its place.
私の脳をかき乱さないでよ。
The shrill ringing worked as acute torture. No doubt at her wit's end, she finally snatched up one of the receivers.
何者なの。この私の支配空間にどうして干渉できるのよ。答えなさい。答えないとこいつの頭を輪切りにするわよ。
She glared straight at me while talking. If at all possible, I really wish to avoid painting the walls of this room with my gray matter.
答えなさい。
A faint whisper reached my ears. Even though it shouldn't have. After all, I wasn't the one holding the receiver. Its tone was pregnant with warmth and kindness, putting me at ease. pregnant with warmth and kindness. That's some writing.
答える必要はなく、君の脅迫も全く必要性を見出せない。この電話を君が取った時点で、我々はすでに座標を特定している。
At the very same time, her eyes shot open in response. A sizable chunk of the classroom's furthest wall was blasted open. I stared round-eyed at the spectacle, while Sheena glared at it with a pair of bloodshot eyes filled with murderous contempt.
さあ、出てこい。私の領域で、私の力で存在を切り刻んでやる。
Even I could sense the presence of a certain someone lurking in the shadows beyond the hole. And soon enough, I heard the crunch of footsteps.
では、問おう。
A young man came forward. The very first thing I thought of as I beheld him was embarrassingly trivial. Yet, oddly enough, I couldn't shake it from my mind. I was certain his skin must have been ice cold to the touch. He looked at her with a gaze bereft of emotion, his eyes reflecting only a lifeless void, his locks the color of midnight. The young man stepped into view, wearing a school uniform, emanating a somewhat frigid aura.
このまがいものの世界において、絶対的支配者として君臨する君が、一体何を恐れている？私に言葉を許し、私に侵入を許している。
それは。
Before she could finish, another unexpected guest entered the fray.
それはまあ異物だもんね。それもあれだ。T か G かさもなきゃエボラってレベルで。
A cheery feminine voice echoed in the darkness, from the same direction as the man's, startling both me and the former Sheena. It sounded familiar. The girl slipped out from the cover of darkness, stepping into the light. Lilith, huh? She wore a dark sailor outfit, with a deeply slit and considerably short skirt, her silky black hair glistening in bewitching hues, almost like it was a thing out of this world. Three things stood out in contrast to her dark visage: her milky white skin, a bright yellow scarf, and a scarlet choker. Still, the hair and uniform gave off the impression of a woman cloaked in the very shadows she slipped out of. The problematic bit was her face, though. Mostly because it looked awfully familiar. In fact, I'd just met and spoken to her a short while back. Then I stumbled upon her decayed corpse, much to my horror.
嘘、ユーリ？
She cocked her head to the side, visibly in thought. After a handful of seconds, she struck her palm with a fist, no doubt having come to a certain conclusion.
ユーリ？ユーリ、リリー。ああ、なるほど。ちょっと会いすぎやしない？ところであなたの名前何だったっけ？
Her only answer was silence and a fierce glare. Yet her expression had lost all trace of its former composure.
確か、あれ、なんだったかな。ごめんね。現実だとあまりに雑魚すぎて覚えてなかったわ。黙れ！
Enraged, Sheena thrust a hand in her direction. It seemed as if a certain something, with a translucent outline, had struck the dark-haired girl, sending a series of vibrant, barely visible ripples through the very air around them. The abrupt, gust-like phenomenon sent the girl's obsidian locks dancing wildly in the air, seemingly come to life, like an entity of its own. Her skirt and scarf, too, fluttered lightly, but that was all. I didn't actually see anything, but I knew she did something. It simply wasn't overtly visible to me.
あら、結構きついわね。
A fresh rivulet of bright red blood trickled down from beneath her cuff, like a stream of molten rubies.
たことないじゃない。たかが私のたかが一撃で血を流すなんて。夜の魔女め。
Alright, guys, and we are right on the border of an hour here, though, so in the interest of not making this any longer, because it's already gone super long, I'm going to end the episode here. So, let's find out what happens in the next episode. Hope you guys are there. I'll see you then.